The warehouse was hot under the heaters where I was. My gut felt heavy and bloated, pleading for digestion, evacuation, amputation. A load more bread had arrived. Each stack had 120 oblongs of vitamin-less leather in it. I took off my shirt and got down to it. Sometimes I could get into it, chucking the loaves around, physical work for the Bourboisie, but I'd been at it for too long by now, i.e. more than once, and a lot more than fucking Tolstoy, to get anything out of it. It was just stuff to let me do other stuff. Like not this stuff, which is a good enough idea when you're doing it. Guess what? Pakistanis had moved one row of mine too close to another to leave room for a third in between. To make room for one of theirs, it was like the Khyber fucking Pass. I started moving it back and they reeled me in. Why you make trouble? Bayer came over and we did the same thing again. Blah, blah, blah. Why you make trouble tonight? Bayer closed his eyes as he talked to me, tilted his head back. I stooped, looked at the wall. They didn't have enough room either, apparently, but they did have twice as much space as I did. One of them had a hair lip. He'd been there 7 years. I felt like telling them something wildly racist, but realised I didn't work for the Daily Mail and nobody was listening. How crap to be driven to this place, arguing with strangers and wanting to be right because they were an unfamiliar colour. They were thinking the same thing too, probably. A Nazi's a Nazi, eh? Let them do what they want, I thought. They'll never be happy. Neither will I, but they don't know that. I'm getting out of here. I'll be lying around depressed and penniless at home soon. They'll be still here, arguing with the next temp bitch about room for bread. Earning money? Yeah. With their mates? Okay. But I went back to my bread and kicked a couple of loose loaves around, brown or white. I didn't care. It felt too easy and a bit cruel, so I stopped. Chand went by on a loader and saw me staring guiltily at my abused granary slice and laughed as he caught my eye. He was a bit fat and jolly with it, and you couldn't dislike him. I was skinny and mean, and you could dislike me without even trying. I checked Schindler's List and counted my Hovis slice and started on that. When that was done, I'd do Tesco wholemeal, then Tesco wholemeal thick, Bran wholemeal thick, and all the rest. It was all the same anyway. Curries and Comet, Mountbatten and Windsor, American beer and piss. But it was a trivial thing to do night after night, repetitive and endless. I was rolling a giant Sisyphean bun up a hill of beans every night. I did meaningless things to fight the meaninglessness, like leaving the middle tray of a stack empty for no reason. This drove the drivers mad, as if they weren't mad in the first place. The stacks grew higher and the bread got heavier. I could throw a tray of 12 up onto the top of a stack of 10 and the grooves would click and it would slide back into place like it was on runners. Or I'd overshoot and the whole lot would fly off the back. Or I'd trap my fingers and tip it all sideways. Oh, any amount of slapstick fun could happen. It was crazy in there, I tell you. Crazy. I come to the end of my supplies, put the spares in an empty tray, scratch my scalp. Time for a break. That little burst gave me some room to rest, same as shitting gives you room to eat. I go back to the office to get my book from my coat, but somebody's nicked it, of course. I asked Peter about it. He said nobody in the place would even understand the title, but they'd nick anything that wasn't nailed down. I reflected briefly that the only two things they couldn't steal would therefore be Martin Luther's 95 Theses and Jesus Christ himself. So now I can't read my book on my break. I went upstairs to the day room, which was now just the room. The canteen had closed a while back, not that it had been open particularly before. The non-day room was just a room with some hard chairs and unstable tables where you could wait for death during the night shift. The drivers used to sit up there smoking cigarettes after the paperwork was done and plot counter-revolutions, formulate grand unification theories, apply Lacanian deconstructivism to the Daily Star. When I walk in, I see two of them, Lambert and Butler, hard at it. I go over to my favourite chocolate drink machine. There's no other machine of any description in there, neither drink, chocolate, nor favourite. So maybe I just walk over to the machine. I overpay for some arbitrary product to distract my metabolism and sit down away from lame brain's trust and look around in my head for something to think about. I felt okay. By this time of night I'd earned 20 quid, which was 20 quid nearer another place. I translated time into money into distance. I figured I could fly to as far as Dieppe on 20 quid. I'd moved about 900 loaves of bread, 450 sandwiches to cross the channel. Makes you think, doesn't it? Actually, no, doesn't, does it? Doesn't make you think at all. Stupid. I stopped thinking about it. I began to feel less okay. I turned my attention to something worse than my life. I looked over at the drivers as they sucked their lives out of their cigarettes like wolf cubs at the nicotine tit. They wore shit brown warehouse coats, drip dry polyester trousers, and monkey boots. They were balding or balded. They'd been 55 years old for most of their lives, and they smelt of ashtrays and damp. They believed white people were better than everyone else because they happened to be white themselves. They had no reflection, no insight, and no sympathy. They were indignant at indifference and indifference to the different, outraged, out of touch, righteous, wronged, and wrong. They made money and paid it back to the establishment in tax or interest. They were victims of their own involuntary consumerism, their disdain for knowledge, and their suspicion of anything except the sources of their bigotry, which they treated with the naivety of hypnotized mayflies. They were the perfect devices of their own enslavement. One of them, Ray, was moaning about how long they had to wait for their vans to be loaded and how he could organise it much better. The bitter lament of the franchiseless. The way he described the shambles of a system, I thought the dispatch team must have been autistic narcoleptics or brain-dead vegetables at the very least. Ray himself was, of course, the very image of tolerance and patience, the sort of person who says, "I'm not a violent man," just before he hacks your legs off with bolt cutters. For 26 years, Ray had been driving a van full of bread 6 miles 4 times a day, and 2 of them it was empty, so he obviously knew everything. Before he could rectify the faults in Husserl's analysis of the missed correlation between perception and time-space invaders, I went for a shit. In the daytime, this was the admin office toilet. At night, it became my secret hideaway from the Sonderkommando-thon outside, because no one else used it. 2 stalls, a 3-man urinal, sink and a mirror over it. I came here 3-4 times a night, far from the maddening crowd. I could stay as long as I wanted, within reason. I could work on that plan, add to a poem. Piss. There's nothing else to say about the toilet. We've all been in one. But there's only so much time you can waste in the toilet, and then people think you're gay or give you a tip on the way out. The run from about 1:30 to 7 usually went pretty quick if you wished you were dead anyway. The barren waste of your life isn't so debilitating when you have a depressing task to fulfill. The little horror blocks out the big horror with perspective alone. The orders come in little bursts I could deal with between the wasteland of my own ruminations. The bread comes, I sort it into random amounts for unknown destinations. I fall back into a sloth of inactivity and my awful mind takes over again. There's one guy, Chan's cousin, who wouldn't stop whistling. He'd whistle anything, Sinatra to Bananarama. Going by on his loader, whistling. It took my mind off the abyss, trying to identify his tunes. Fair enough, but it's no way to pass your work in life, is it? This guy, Lebaya, he wore enormous glasses and tried to pass off jokes from the TV as his own until I started naming the shows they came from. Everyone knows you only pass off the most obscure jokes as your own. It's like making up statistics to win an argument to see if anyone knows you're bullshitting. The meta conversation is much more interesting than just talking. Ask Harpo Marx. I pile up my stacks, surrounding myself with the forest plastic trees. Even the colours are mundane. The brown trays with their dull red flanges, the orange forklift loaders, the dark or pasty people, all drained and bled out by the lights. There's no blue, which is always a bad sign, except in food, and no wood, which is another. But it's probably good if you have a wood-free food. But don't tell Daniel. The walls of the warehouse are dirty white, like some of the people. There's a tide mark of dirtier white along the bottom 6 feet or so of the wall where people have leaned on it or brushed against it. The air is everyone else's old breath. The light is brittle and turns you sallow, like some of the people and most of the products. There's no nutrition, no succour, just nutters and suckers. In this environmentally unfriendly environment, I move bread from one place to another. I do something, I'm not anything. I can't abide it, but I abide. What does not kill me just isn't trying hard enough. I went and told Peter I'd run out of bread. He told me to hang around and see what happens. There's more coming out in a minute. I go around to talk to Chand. He's doing the meat load just next to the office. Nobody knew why it was called the meat load or what it meant, Or rather, I didn't know and I'd never asked anyone. Chand? Why is it called a meatloaf? Fuck should I know? Why you make trouble there? Chand had a hand-pushed trolley which held one stack of bread and a nice demeanour. He was going up and down his lines, chucking trays off now and then. I balanced on the back bar of his trolley and scooted along with one foot to push it for him for a while. We started talking aimlessly as usual until we came across something we could always talk about, like Jack the Ripper, school days, outer space, what Chand could remember about India from when he was young. Tonight we talked about his kids. He had a little girl and a baby boy with no name yet. But the little girl wanted to call him Johnny. Johnny Moon. He's got to be a movie star with that name. Film star. Good name for a song, Johnny Moon, Johnny Moon. He laughed again. Heavy night tonight. Yeah. Why? Production. Something blew up in the day shift, didn't it? Trand took the trolley and went off to get a different sort of bread, like he did every night. I waited for him, hands in pockets, watching the Africans on Morning Goods. Morning Goods was bakery code for crumpets and other breakfast shit. They had to count the chocolate whirls, tea cakes and waffles down to the last crumb. 12 hours a night, 6 nights a week, most weeks a year. Those guys must really love their kids. Or hate them. That's what it was like most nights in the bakery.